You play by the rules. You don't cause scenes. You work hard, keep your head down, and trust that if you're patient, if you stay good, your time will come, especially when it comes to family, especially when it comes to something your father promised you. That's how I lived for years. I didn't ask for handouts. I didn't make demands. I trusted that when the time came, I'd receive what was mine. But one day, my stepmother looked me directly in the eye, no emotion, no shame, and said, "Your father left you a trust fund, but I gave it to Haley instead. She's more deserving than you." No apology, no hesitation, just matter of fact, as if she were correcting a clerical error, as if rewriting a will, his last wish, was just another administrative task on her to-do list. I sat there trying to process the weight of that sentence, that my father, who had quietly saved for years, who once told me, "This is for your future, not just school, not just a house. It's so you don't have to start from nothing like I did." That gift had been signed over to someone else, not because of need, not because of a mistake, but because she didn't think I deserved it. And here's the part that still stings. I believed her. For about 5 seconds, I believed maybe I wasn't worth it. Maybe I hadn't done enough. Maybe Haley really did shine brighter. But that didn't last long, because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my father didn't just leave behind a fund. He left a trail of documents, of instructions, of a promise I never forgot, even when everyone else seemed determined to bury it. And while they were celebrating Haley's new condo, while they were calling it a win for the family, I was sitting quietly with the original trust documents in my hands, because she may have thought I was too soft to fight, too quiet to challenge her, too insignificant to matter. But she forgot something crucial. The daughter who waits patiently often notices everything. This isn't just a story about money. It's about what happens when someone tries to erase you from your own legacy and learns that you don't need a raised voice to deliver justice. You just need the right paper trail and perfect timing. My father was never the loudest man in the room, but when he spoke, people listened. He built everything with his hands, his business, his house, and his retirement plan. And when he remarried after my mom passed, I tried to believe that Sandra, my new stepmother, would honor the life he built. At first, she was polite, chilly but polite. The kind of woman who smiled with her lips but never her eyes. Always polished, always composed, always slightly on stage. And then there was Haley, her daughter. Blonde, charming, always knew what to say at the right time. And from the moment our families merged, it was clear she would always be the favored one. I didn't mind, not really. I was older, more reserved. Where she laughed loud and worked rooms, I stuck to corners and listened. I figured as long as we kept our distance and kept things civil, it would all be fine. And for a while, it was. When my dad got sick, I moved back in temporarily to help out. I drove him to appointments, sat with him during chemo. I was the one who handled the insurance, the pills, the late-night grocery runs. Sandra? She managed the guest list for hospital visits. Haley stopped by with flowers and tearful hugs when it was convenient. But the moment he passed, things shifted fast. There was no big family meeting, no shared reading of the will. Just Sandra handing me a folder and saying, "There wasn't much left. Your father wasn't as prepared as he thought." Inside, a basic summary of assets. Nothing unusual, nothing in my name. I asked about the trust because I remembered him telling me about it when I was 17. He said it was for my future, grad school or a down payment on a house. Sandra blinked, slow and practiced, and said, "Oh, that? It must have closed years ago. The market hit it hard. I'm so sorry." I nodded. I believed her. What else could I do? She was in control of the estate, the executor, the one everyone called graceful during the funeral. I didn't want to look greedy or ungrateful, so I let it go. I grieved. I went back to work. I built my life with the pieces I had left. But about 6 months later, something didn't sit right. I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw Haley's new condo, captioned, "First home, in cash. Thank you, Dad." Dad? She was Sandra's daughter. Not his, not legally adopted. She'd always called him Mark, not Dad. He never corrected her. But still, "Thank you, Dad." That night, something cracked open. I pulled out the only box of his I'd kept, an old cigar box filled with paper scraps, letters, photos. I hadn't touched it in over a year. At the very bottom, taped behind a picture of us fishing when I was 9, was a key, small, brass, engraved with the number 134. I remembered it instantly. Dad had once told me, "If anything ever happens to me, you'll want to check box 134 at First National. Don't let anyone talk you out of it." At the time, I rolled my eyes, thought he was being dramatic. But now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I drove straight to the bank. It took a few minutes to explain. Then an older clerk brought me back, had me sign a few papers, and opened the safe deposit box. Inside were 2 things: a slim leather folder and a handwritten letter. I opened the folder first, and there it was. The trust. Fully funded, untouched, $278,000 in a custodial account, designated to be transferred to me at age 35. I was 34 and a half, and suddenly every polite excuse Sandra had made snapped into place. She hadn't forgotten the trust. She'd hidden it. And worse, she'd used it. That explained the cash condo, the lavish spa trip she and Haley took last spring, the new Audi parked in their driveway. I took a photo of every page, scanned the barcode, printed the statement, and then I opened the letter. It was short. If you're reading this, then you already know. I set this aside for you because I know how this world works. I know who's loudest in the room, but I've seen how you work in silence. And I trust you to use this when the time comes. That was all it said. No dates, no signature, just his handwriting. But I didn't need more. I had his words. I had the legal record. And I had the clarity I'd been missing for far too long. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft. Strategic, cold, personal. And it was time I stopped asking for permission and started preparing for justice. There's a special kind of betrayal that doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It comes wrapped in calm voices and phrases like, "It's just what's best for everyone," or, "You'll understand one day." That's how Sandra operated. Not with cruelty, at least not the kind you could point to, but with something colder, cleaner. It's how she'd spoken when she handed me that empty folder after Dad's funeral. It's how she brushed off every question I asked about the trust. And it's exactly how she spoke when I walked into her kitchen, sat down, and told her I found the trust. Her spoon stopped mid-stir in her coffee. No flinch, no panic, just a blink. "I see." That was it. No denial, no shock, just acknowledgement. I pressed further. "It was never dissolved. It's still active, fully funded, and you told me it was gone." She set the spoon down, smiled softly, and said, "You weren't using it. You were doing fine on your own. Haley, she needed a foundation. And frankly, she's more capable of turning that money into something." I just stared at her, my skin cold, my heart pounding. Not from shock anymore, but from the clarity of what had just been said. She hadn't made a mistake. She hadn't been confused. She chose to give away what was mine. Because in her eyes, I hadn't earned it. And somehow, she thought I'd nod and thank her for her wisdom. But instead, I stood up. I didn't scream. Didn't throw the coffee cup. Didn't say the million things clawing at the back of my throat. I just said, "You had no right." And I walked out. That night, I called Clara, a former classmate turned estate attorney. We weren't close, but I remembered her once saying, "If your parents have money, you better learn how to protect yourself." I told her everything. She asked for documentation. I sent her every scanned page, every line from the safe deposit box, every photo. She called me back 48 hours later. "This is serious," she said. She had no legal right to alter or redirect that trust. She's not a trustee. She wasn't even a co-beneficiary. This is fraud, and depending on how she accessed the funds, maybe worse. My stomach dropped, not because I was scared of what came next, but because someone finally said it out loud. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a crime. Clara got to work. She filed a formal petition to reinstate the trust and freeze any further distributions. We requested a full accounting of all estate and trust-related transactions handled by Sandra, and we prepared to subpoena her financial records. And me? I prepared too. I combed through every piece of mail my father had ever sent me, found notes scribbled in his margins, doodles on the back of envelopes, every one of them reminding me who he saw me as, not the quiet one, not the afterthought, but the anchor. Meanwhile, Haley posted a new selfie. wearing designer heels, posing on the balcony of her bought-in cash condo. Captioned, "Earned, not gifted." And I laughed out loud, because that's when I knew she didn't even realize the money wasn't hers. Sandra had fed her a fantasy, and Haley was too eager to play along to ask questions. But that didn't change what was coming. A few weeks later, Sandra received a court summons. Clara had done her job well. Sandra was ordered to submit all trust-related documentation within 30 days. A forensic accountant was assigned to review every transaction made from the estate since my father's passing. Haley's name appeared on several of those withdrawals. And suddenly, the calm facade started cracking. I got a text from Sandra. "We don't have to go down this road. There's still time to fix this quietly. You'll get something. Let's not ruin the family." I didn't respond, because the family wasn't being ruined. It had been rotting quietly for years. And I had finally lifted the lid. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. Clara found an error in the amendment Sandra used to justify her actions. It had been forged. Not only was it unsigned by my father, it used a notary who hadn't been employed at the bank for 3 years. Her license had expired long before the document was dated. That mistake, that one lazy forgery, it turned everything in our favor. We submitted it as evidence, and suddenly, this wasn't just a civil dispute. It became a question of criminal fraud. The judge froze the remaining funds, blocked access to any estate accounts, and scheduled a hearing that would put Sandra and everything she did on record. I remember sitting in Clara's office staring at the copy of that forged document, the sloppy signature, the incorrect date, the fact that they'd tried to do all of this quietly, assuming I'd never ask questions. And I remember her saying she underestimated the wrong daughter. And that was it. That was the moment I stopped feeling like the victim and started becoming the one who would make this right. By the time the court date was set, I no longer felt like I was reacting. I was planning. Sandra had spent years making me believe I was passive, unimportant, just another name on the family tree. But now she was the one stumbling to keep up. The court ordered her to deliver full financial disclosures, bank records, wire transfers, statements from the estate account my father left behind. It didn't take long to see where the money had gone. A $90,000 wire to Haley, 3 months after Dad's funeral. A $47,000 debit for family renovations, which turned out to be Haley's kitchen remodel. Thousands in unexplained cash withdrawals marked as gifting adjustments. And yet, Sandra still acted like she was the victim. She showed up to the hearing dressed in a beige suit and soft pearls, spoke with the same calm, slow voice she'd always used when lying to my face. "Your Honor, my stepdaughter is confused. My husband always told me he wanted me to handle things the way I saw fit. Haley was like a daughter to him." But that's when Clara stood and calmly handed the judge the notarized trust, the real one, with my name, dated, authenticated, and confirmed by the original lawyer who drafted it. The judge looked over the papers, then looked at Sandra, and asked, "You were never named trustee, so how did you access these funds?" Sandra stammered something about informal arrangements. The judge raised an eyebrow. Clara added, "We also have evidence of a forged amendment and a now expired notary stamp. We believe this was not just unethical, it was criminal." The tension in the room shifted. Sandra's lawyer, clearly unaware of the forged document, asked for a recess. I didn't say a word, didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just stared at the floor and waited. Because while she was unraveling, I was finally getting steady. Haley, meanwhile, had gone silent. She'd stopped posting on Instagram. The cash condo pictures disappeared. I'd heard from a mutual acquaintance that she lost her job after her employer learned she was involved in an ongoing financial dispute. Apparently, the fraud report had made its way into the HR department, and while Haley hadn't been formally charged with anything, the optics were bad enough. I didn't take any pleasure in it. Not really, but I did feel something like release, because for the first time, the weight wasn't just on me anymore. Then came the settlement offer. Sandra reached out through her attorney, said she wanted to make things right. They proposed a split, 50-50 of the remaining trust. No public trial, no formal charges, just silence. Clara asked me what I wanted to do, and I thought about it. For a moment, I really did. But then I remembered the way Sandra had smiled when she told me I didn't deserve what was mine. I remembered how she sat in my father's house pretending to mourn while quietly rewriting the ending to my story. So I said, "No, I don't want half. I want all of what was mine, and I want it on the record." The trial moved forward. Sandra tried everything. Said she was misunderstood. Said Haley needed help. Said I was always jealous, but the paper trail told a different story. And in the end, the judge ruled decisively, full reinstatement of the trust. Sandra removed from all remaining estate duties, damages awarded for misappropriation, court fees covered by her. It was over. On paper, legally, publicly, over. But what came next was quieter, and somehow even more powerful. A few days later, I received a letter. Not from Sandra, not from Haley, from the law office that had handled my father's original estate planning. It included a second sealed envelope, handwritten, in his script. He'd left it with instructions, only to be delivered if the trust was ever contested. Inside the letter, it said, "If you're holding this, then someone's trying to take what was always meant for you. And I want you to know, I trusted you for a reason, not because you demanded, but because you always showed up even when no one noticed. Let this remind you, worth isn't something they hand you. It's something you protect, quietly, consistently, and without apology." I sat with that letter for a long time, long after the case was closed, long after the money was returned, because that was the real victory. Not the dollar amount, not the courtroom win, but the truth. The proof that I wasn't invisible, that my father saw me, believed in me, and gave me the tools to defend myself, even if it took me years to use them. That night, I walked into the condo I rented for the last 5 years. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I didn't have. I was thinking about what I'd earned. The next day, I called a realtor, and I told her, "I'm ready to buy." I thought the courtroom victory would be the final chapter, and in some ways it was. The trust was returned. Sandra was removed from all estate access. Haley disappeared from social media completely, and I was finally free to breathe again. But closure is a funny thing. Sometimes it doesn't come in court transcripts. Sometimes it comes in the quietest places. About a month after the case closed, I got a call from a woman named Judith. She was my father's longtime financial advisor, someone I vaguely remembered from my teens, but hadn't spoken to in years. She said, "I heard what happened. I'm sorry you had to go through that. But your father left something else, something Sandra never knew about." I blinked. Another trust? Not exactly. Judith invited me to her office the following week. When I arrived, she handed me a small black envelope. Inside was a single-page letter, typed in all caps with my father's initials at the bottom. It read, "If Sandra ever touches the primary trust, or if she attempts to redirect the funds from your name, go to Box 147 at Southland Security." He had left me a fallback plan, a second location, a safety deposit box completely disconnected from the first trust. Sandra had never known it existed. I went to the bank the next day. Box 147 was registered under a holding company Dad had set up, something called Lighthouse Ledger LLC. It had no name on it, no association with our family. Inside, a handwritten ledger and a cashier's check. The check was made out to me, $125,000, dated just 2 weeks before he passed away. And the ledger? It was a record of every contribution he had made to the trust, every bonus, every investment, every dividend. It was detailed, precise, with notes like, moved 5 kilos into separate fund, Haley's birthday approaching, watch for manipulation. Sandra asked about early withdrawal, denied. He had seen it coming, not just the favoritism, not just the power play, but the outright theft. There was also a final note scribbled in pencil at the bottom. If this was never needed, great. But if it was, then I hope you used it to defend yourself. And if you're still standing after all this, buy yourself something that can't be stolen. I felt the tears come, not out of sadness, but relief. He knew. He always knew. Sandra had tried to frame me as bitter, jealous, petty. She thought I'd fade quietly into shame if I didn't get the money. But what she never understood was this. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth. I deposited the check and moved forward, without telling anyone. Let them think the trust was all there was. Let them believe the courtroom was the end of the story. But now I had a cushion, a clean, silent victory. And more importantly, I had evidence that my father never doubted me. Not once. I bought a small home on the edge of the city. Not flashy, but warm, sunlit, and entirely mine. The first thing I moved in wasn't a couch or a coffee table. It was the box from that second deposit vault. I placed it in the top drawer of my desk, just as a reminder, not of what was stolen, but of what I reclaimed. Sandra, she tried to recover her reputation, posted a carefully worded healing and boundaries essay on Facebook, said the court battle was a family misunderstanding. No one bought it. Not after the forgery, not after the receipts, not after the financial freeze. Haley moved back in with her mother. Rumor has it she tried to sell the condo and downsize, but the housing market wasn't kind. I didn't reach out to them, not once, because at some point, silence becomes the loudest statement you can make. And as for the rest of the family, the ones who once praised Sandra's poise and Haley's charm, they stopped calling too. Not because they didn't know what happened, but because now they did. And knowing meant they could no longer pretend. One of my cousins reached out quietly. She said, "I wish I'd said something sooner. I just didn't know how deep it all went." I told her, "It's okay. Some people protect their peace by staying silent. I just chose to protect mine by speaking up. This isn't just a story about a trust fund. It's about the moment you realize your voice was never too quiet. You were just surrounded by people who were too loud in their entitlement. They tried to rewrite the narrative, but I had the original script and the pen. And now I'm writing the rest of it myself. I didn't win because I shouted louder. I didn't win because I played dirty. I won because I stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable. Because for the first time in my life, I chose not to be the quiet one in the corner. I chose to speak up, to read the fine print, to challenge the narrative that I was lucky just to be included. And in doing so, I learned something I wish someone had told me years earlier. Silence is only graceful when it's chosen, not when it's forced. Today I live in a home I own. Nothing extravagant. Just warm hardwood floors, a small garden in the back, and sunlight that touches every room by noon. It's not just real estate. It's proof that I could rebuild, that I didn't need anyone to hand me value. I already had it. I used part of the second fund, my father's quiet insurance policy, to start a nonprofit scholarship. It's called the Second Daughter Fund. It supports women who've been told they were less deserving, who were passed over by family, by systems, by people who couldn't see their worth. Because I know how that feels, to be the afterthought, to be the responsible one who never gets the reward, to be the girl who doesn't make a scene so she gets nothing. But not anymore. A few months ago, I went back to visit my father's grave. I brought fresh flowers and a copy of the court ruling, folded neatly inside an envelope. I sat beside the headstone, ran my fingers across his name, and whispered, "You were right." I used it when the time came. And I didn't let them rewrite you or me. It took time to let go of the anger, to stop imagining confrontations that would never happen, to stop wanting an apology from people who only feel sorry they lost. But healing doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it comes with peace, with choosing not to chase what's already broken, with knowing that your dignity is not up for debate. I don't talk to Sandra or Haley, not because I hate them, but because I love myself more. And I don't need them to know how well I'm doing. I know. And that's enough. And to anyone listening right now who's been told to let it go, to not stir the pot, or to be grateful for what you get, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to defend what's yours. You are allowed to call out betrayal. You are allowed to stop being the one who always gives in. Because people who love you don't make you prove it. They don't make you beg for crumbs. They don't label your boundaries as bitterness. I used to think the trust fund was the most valuable thing I lost, but now I see it differently. The real loss would have been losing myself to silence. The real win was reclaiming my voice. And once you do that, the money, the respect, the freedom, they just follow. If you've ever been told that someone else deserved it more, if you've ever had your future redirected by people who thought they knew better, or if you've ever had to quietly rebuild after being written off, drop number 1 in the comments. Let me know you're out there. And if this story resonated, subscribe, because we don't stay silent here. We share the stories others tried to erase. You're not alone. You never were. Next time, I'll tell you about the day my brother invited me to his housewarming, just to brag that Grandpa left him the vacation home. He didn't know I had the original deed. Or what Grandpa really wrote in the final clause. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.